Hey, everybody, welcome to the Debrief. Happy Friday. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington today. We've got a lot of news for you this morning. Some fast-moving, explosive developments from the White House. President Trump now calling on another foreign country to investigate his primary political rival, Joe Biden. Plus, some new text messages overnight reveal new details on just how his administration tried to pressure Ukraine into doing just that. Why Democrats are calling this outrageous today. Republicans are keeping silent. What all of this means for impeachment coming up. Plus, an ABC News exclusive with two jurors involved in deliberations over sentencing a former Dallas police officer, Amber Guyger. How they reached a determination to sentence her for just 10 years in prison. We have more on that coming up with Marcus Moore from Dallas. And we take a trip to Comic-Con in New York City. All of that and more right after these headlines.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics has just released the jobs report for September. The economy added 136,000 jobs, and job growth has averaged 161,000 jobs per month so far in 2019. U.S. employers added fewer jobs than expected in September, and wage gains slowed, adding to signs of slowing growth in the domestic economy. However, the unemployment rate has dropped from 3.7% to 3.5%. The last time it was this low was in December 1969.
In a lawsuit filed Thursday, De Niro's former assistant Graham Chase Robinson accuses the award-winning actor of harassment and gender discrimination, claiming that over the course of the 11 years she worked for him, De Niro communicated in a hostile, abusive, and intimidating manner, often while he was intoxicated, in which he denigrated, berated, bullied, and hurled expletives at her. Her attorney sharing this voicemail from 2012.
You're upset with me because you tell me how nice you are? How dare you? You're about to be fired. You're history. How dare you disrespect me? How much you did? You gotta be kidding me, you spoiled brat. You.
This amazing footage shows life above the clouds, but with breathtaking views comes a devastating reality. This white-tailed eagle, named Victor, will embark on 5 flights over the Alps in the hope of capturing evidence that these grand glaciers are now crumbling because of global warming. Organizers hope that this Eagle's View footage will help show the world the reality of climate change and prompt people to take swifter action.
And we begin today, though, with the latest developments on the impeachment inquiry here in Washington. The president, in an extraordinary move yesterday, calling on another foreign country to help him dig up dirt on Joe Biden, asking China, a geopolitical foe of the United States, to investigate a former American vice president. Think about that. And there is no evidence, at least right now, of any wrongdoing. We're learning also some new details about how the president's team also tried to pressure Ukraine in doing the same thing as he now wants China to do. Karen Travers is our White House correspondent. Karen, so much is happening so fast here. People having a hard time digesting all these developments. But let's just start with the president's conduct, his declaration yesterday in front of cameras that he wants China now to look into Joe Biden. This is a pretty brazen statement. He's acting as if this is all okay.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if we learned through a breaking news story that the president had said this on a phone call. It would be a major scandal. Instead, the president says it right here at the White House on camera. The timing is certainly incredible, Devin, because, of course, this comes as the president's phone call with the president of Ukraine is the centerpiece of the Democrats' impeachment inquiry right now. And you saw the president yesterday suggesting that China should be doing the same thing, investigating former Vice President Joe Biden and his son. And this is also interesting given the timing of this because the United States and China, of course, are locked in intense trade negotiations. Next week, senior Chinese officials will be coming here to Washington to meet with senior Trump administration officials. And there are now questions about whether or not the president is going to make this part of those talks. Is he going to put pressure on China to move forward on this investigation? He was asked yesterday if he would talk about this with President Xi. He says he hasn't, but he would consider doing it. It's something to start thinking about. past. The president's top trade advisor was asked about this today, about whether this has come up in calls in the past and whether this would be part of the trade conversations. But Larry Kudlow said that he doesn't know. He couldn't add anything more to that. The president, though, of course, is going to get a lot of questions about this. And it is incredible, as you say, that he did this so brazenly and right there out in the open on camera.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, Ken. It'd be one thing if there was evidence out there that the president wanted another country to look into. But in this case, as Dan Abrams said this morning on Good Morning America, the president is asking these countries to go find him evidence.
Just start looking into this. Yes, and the president defending himself on Twitter today by saying, you know, that he has a right to root out corruption. He has an obligation to do this as president. But the question is, what there is there, or is he just doing this to try and dig up dirt on a potential political rival?
Let's bring in Catherine Falders into the conversation. She's our investigative reporter up on Capitol Hill, because we're also getting a clearer picture, Catherine, of how the president tried to pressure Ukraine to do this investigating into the Bidens. You broke this story last night. You obtained these text messages from U.S. diplomats that were involved with the Ukraine, appearing to show how the administration was trying to pressure that country to do this investigation.
Well, that's right, Devin. We obtained these texts yesterday afternoon, and what they show is that the top U.S. diplomats to Ukraine, they wrote to a group of American diplomats. I want to read you this text. It says, quote, "I think it's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign." Now, these concerns, Devin, were expressed by Bill Taylor, who was a top U.S. diplomat to Ukraine at the time. He received a response on that same texting thread, which was an encrypted messaging thread that says that charge was not correct, that those weren't the president's intentions, Devin. But later in the evening, the committee released also some of these text messages late last night, not the full picture of them. But what it showed is that senior State Department officials were using a potential summit between President Trump and the Ukrainian president as leverage to get the Ukraine to investigate Trump's political rivals, Devin.
Yeah, the president says he wasn't pressuring anybody, but behind the scenes, it's clear they were trying to use this possibility of a meeting at the White House, the possibility of that aid, certainly to do what the president had wanted. Thanks, Catherine. Stand by. Let's bring in Patrick Ravel into this conversation. He's been doing reporting for ABC News over in the Ukraine, in Kiev. Hey, Patrick. So Ukrainian officials, let's talk a little bit about these Biden allegations that the president is kicking up. Ukrainian officials, as you've reported previously, had looked into this years ago, didn't find any evidence of wrongdoing. But then a curious development today. The new prosecutor in the Ukraine announced that they're going to re-examine some past criminal cases with an oligarch who had some ties to Biden.
Yeah, hi, Devin. I mean, so bear with me because this is quite complicated. But basically, you know, we've been hearing that President Trump has obviously been demanding that the Ukrainians investigate Biden and his son, Hunter Biden. And what's happened today was the prosecutor's office hasn't opened an investigation into Hunter Biden. But what they have done is said they're going to review these cases about an oligarch named Mykola Zlochevsky. He basically owns the company Burisma, an energy company that Hunter Biden sat on the board of. And this is sort of the heart of this theory that that Hunter Biden could have been doing wrongdoing, and that in particular Joe Biden might have abused his power by having a prosecutor fired who was investigating this company that Hunter Biden sat on the board of. And so what we found in our reporting is that there's no evidence that Joe Biden did that, but nonetheless the president has been pushing this theory that he did for months actually, but in particular in this call with the Ukrainian President Zelensky. And so what's happened today is that now the prosecutor's office is saying that they are looking again at these cases into Burisma, into this company that Hunter Biden sat on the board of. And what that does is it seems to suggest that, you know, perhaps there could somehow be something for them to look into, even though they've also said, and they said again today, that actually they're not looking into Hunter Biden and there is no evidence that Hunter Biden did anything wrong. And so obviously it all sounds very complicated, and that's because it is, you know, and what it begs the question is, perhaps are the Ukrainian authorities now trying to try and show to the president that they are doing something, that they are actually willing to help investigate in some form, or give the impression they are investigating. And certainly, as you know, as we saw in these text messages that Karen was talking about, we saw there that the Ukrainians were potentially willing to show in some way to try and show that they might assist in this investigation, even though they never themselves said that there was something to investigate.
Patrick Ravel for us in the Ukraine. A complicated story for sure, but Patrick, your reporting is so important, showing the lengths to which the administration is going to investigate Biden. Karen Travers, let's bring you back into this, because a question a lot of people are asking is, where are Republicans in all this? Do they think the president's conduct, calling for China, a rival of the United States, to investigate with no evidence a former vice president is okay, legitimate, appropriate? What are we hearing from some of the president's allies?
And not a lot from Republican lawmakers, because, Devin, this is the most perfectly timed congressional recess that just really worked out nicely for Republicans that don't want to answer questions about this. A lot of no comments, a lot of we're not going to get into that, but that won't be the case in a week and a half when Congress is back in town. So I think the president's allies, though, that you see going out on social media, going out on cable defending him, say, yeah, he has a right to try and root out corruption. There was no quid pro quo in that conversation with the president of Ukraine, despite the clear indication of some pressure that was being put on President Zelensky. But this new layer with China, I think, is going to complicate things because, of course, you were talking about, as you mentioned at the top, a very critical rival of the United States, the timing of this during intense trade negotiations, and the president seeming to pull something out of the blue and say that China should just start looking into this. He spoke a few moments ago here at the White House to reporters on the South Lawn and insisted that he's not trying to get investigations into campaigns, he's trying to get investigations into corruption. Look for the president to be sticking with that line of defense.
Well, providing no evidence of such at all in this case. We need to keep repeating that. Karen Travers, White House correspondent. Thanks so much, Karen. Have a great weekend. Let's go back to Catherine quickly, because the impeachment inquiry taking a new turn today on Capitol Hill. Catherine, the committees investigating the president in the House are going to hear from a key witness today. Tell us about it, why it's important.
Right. It's the Intelligence Community Inspector General. He's behind closed doors up here on Capitol Hill. It's important because this is the second time, Devin, that he has been up here speaking to this committee. But this time, now the members have seen the complaint. They have more questions about the complaint. They want to know who specifically he interviewed to corroborate the whistleblower's claim, Devin.
Catherine Falders, our investigative reporter up on Capitol Hill, working around the clock. Catherine, thank you so much. To Dallas, Texas now, and some new details about how the jury that sentenced former Dallas cop Amber Guyger to 10 years in prison this week for killing an innocent man in his own home. How they arrived at that determination. Prosecutors, you'll recall, had sought at least 28 years for Guyger, but now in an ABC News exclusive, we're hearing from two of the people on the jury who explained their gut-wrenching deliberations and why they believed a lighter sentence was appropriate.
I think that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
There was a lot of crying.
A lot of crying.
When we were told to go decide between 5 and life, that was like, we didn't have words.
Prosecutors were asking for 28 years.
They were.
You all landed at 10.
After hearing about how his family talked about him, he seemed like just the light in their lives, and he was kind and just caring and forgiving. And I told everyone, I was like, I'm really having a hard time with this because we all agree that it was a mistake, and I don't think Bo would want to take harsh vengeance. I think he would want to forgive her. And I didn't feel like I had any right to speak for him, and he isn't there to talk for himself. But listening to how people talked about him, I felt like he would forgive her.
They asked for 28 years, and I'm going to be honest and true. I was like, I can't give her 28 years. I know a lot of people are not happy about the 10 years, but I felt like, you know, for this case was not like any other case. You can't compare this case to any of those other officers killing unarmed black men. Those officers that killed unarmed black men, when they got out, they went back to living their lives. Amber Guyger, ever since she killed that man, she has not been the same. She showed remorse, and that she's going to have to deal with that for the rest of her life.
And Marcus Moore joins me now from Dallas. Marcus did the interview there, covered this extraordinary story from the start. Marcus, good to see you. I was struck by how these jurors seem so focused on Botham Jean and what he would do if he were issuing a sentence to Amber Guyger.
It was surprising, right? Because I don't think anyone really expected that to be so paramount in their minds about how they would decide the punishment here. And Devin, you should know that when they got back to the jury room to begin their deliberations after closing arguments, and they decided that she was guilty, then they moved into the punishment phase. There were so many, everyone had a different year. Amount of years, a different sentence. Some wanted the 28, others wanted less. And so they had to come to an agreement. And it was one of the jurors who you just heard from. It was him who said, you know what is it that Botham would want? Because everything, as you heard him say, everything he heard about Botham is that he was such a kind person and forgiving person, a man of Christ, and that he would not want this eye for an eye, or this vengeance, if you will. And that is how they ended up landing on the 10 years. It was absolutely fascinating to hear them talk about that. And Devin, the one thing I take away from it is how difficult it was for them to come to that decision. It was hard.
I can only imagine also just the infusion of faith into this process, talk of grace among all the parties here. We remember that image of Botham Jean's brother going down, a powerful scene that you reported on, giving a hug to Amber Guyger. You actually talked to that brother, Brant, this morning on Good Morning America. Let's listen to what he had to say.
There's some people who are not ready to forgive her. So what can you say to those people who are not ready to forgive Amber Guyger?
Just like each and everyone has steps to get towards actually forgiving. I probably went through those faster than other people. Yeah. Some people went through it faster than me. If you are trying to forgive her, understand that she is a human being. She still deserves love. She made a mistake that she probably truly regrets. So if you want to forgive her, just understand that God forgave you. And I know that every time I ask God for forgiveness, he forgives me. So who am I to not forgive someone who asked? I waited 1 year to hear I'm sorry, and I'm grateful for that. And that's why I forgive her.
Powerful testimony, Marcus. That's Botham Jean's brother. Didn't even want Amber Guyger to go behind bars. Is that sentiment shared by the rest of the Jean family?
It's my understanding that the family they're trying to find forgiveness. You know, Jean's sister released a statement saying that she's proud of her brother. She admires what he did for his own healing, and that she prays every day that she'll get to a point of forgiveness, but that he is already there. And actually, I do want to bring in the family attorney, Daryl Washington, who can actually better answer that question for you. He has obviously been in touch with the family on a daily basis. And Daryl, great to be with you. Thank you for
great to be with you.
Being here. You know, we've heard so much about this trial, and then that stunning moment where Brant said that he has forgiven Amber Guyger. And the immediate question is, has the entire family forgiven her? How do you answer that?
Well, the family is a very strong religious family. I think they're going to get there. Brant got to that point much faster than everyone else. But the family wants everyone to know that they will get to a position where they will eventually forgive Amber. But the thing that's most important is they want everyone to know forgiving does not mean you don't have to take responsibility for the act that took place. So I think the most important thing out of all of this is that Brant showed us what compassion looks like. I think the words that he stated in that courtroom, it made all of us have to reflect. And I hope that now it's going to make the city of Dallas and police departments all throughout the country realize that there are training issues that we really need to focus on, training issues that could have prevented September 6th. And if that happens, then I think Botham's death will not be in vain.
And I want to take you back to the jury room, and where we learned that it was Botham Jean who they were thinking about when they landed on that 10-year prison sentence. Was that surprising to you?
You know, I had not heard it that way before, but just knowing the person that Bolton was, Bolton would have not wished bad on anyone. I know the father testified during trial that if Amber Guyger would have just simply spoken to Bolton, that he would have invited Amber for a bowl of ice cream. So that was just the type of person Bolton was. I think the biggest thing that Bolton would want to come out of all of this is change and for people to have compassion. And if we're able to change the system so that no one else has to die the way Bolton died, then I think Bolton will be happy about that.
There are a lot of people who are watching this and who are out there in this country who say that this 10-year prison sentence was not right, that it was too lenient. What do you say to those people, and what does the family say?
I mean, what was most important for the family was Amber Guyger being held responsible for Bolton's death. That was a victory for the family. I think that should be a victory for the public as well, because as you know, it's been so very difficult to get officers indicted. And to get an officer convicted, that's extra tough. So I think that sends a message to the public that jurors are now convicting police officers. As for the 10 years, you know, it's really hard to make a determination how many years you give someone for a crime. We know that there have been black males throughout this country who have been sentenced to prison much longer for a lesser crime. But we just hope that during this time it gives Amber Guyger the opportunity to reflect, and somehow one day she's going to come out and admit that what she did was wrong.
Darrell Washington, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. A family attorney representing the Jean family. And Devin, one of the things the jurors told us during our interview is that Botham Jean really seemed like the person we would all want in our lives, and they couldn't help but think about that. Devin.
And that's for sure. Marcus, thanks for the powerful reporting. Great conversation there with Darrell Washington. Look forward to seeing you on World News tonight. Marcus Moore for us in Dallas. Thank you, Marcus. We turn now to alarming new numbers on vaping from the CDC. The agency says there are now nearly 1,100 cases of confirmed lung injury associated with vaping. That's across 48 states, including now 19 deaths linked to vaping. I want to bring in Tulsi Patel from ABC's medical unit in New York. Tulsi, concerning to a lot of people, and I know that the government has been investigating what exactly is causing these illnesses and death. Do we have any sense yet of clarity on that question?
Yeah, Devin, so unfortunately we don't have information about that right now. We don't know what specific chemicals, what substances, or what products are actually causing these lung illnesses. What we know is that the CDC has reported that about 78% of reported cases have been linked to THC-containing products.
So THC and their nicotine in some of these chemicals as well. Struck by the numbers here. Last week there were about 800 reported probable cases of vaping-related illness. It's spiked 200 cases this week. Do we have a sense that this issue is growing, or is it just simply more reporting? What's with the big uptick?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think we are getting more numbers reported to us, but I think in general it's just alarming to see that the total number is growing each and every week.
And finally, we know there's a lot of medical advice out there for parents, for people of all ages that use vaping devices. Remind us again now what the government is saying as these numbers continue to climb.
Sure. The CDC is recommending that everyone refrain from using e-cigarettes or vaping products moving forward, especially as they continue to investigate these lung illnesses.
All right, be on alert. The CDC saying those numbers are climbing. Tulsi Patel from ABC's medical unit, thank you so much. Now to that historic heat in the south and some flash flooding in the southwest, and finally some cooler temperatures here in the east, starting to feel like fall. Our ABC chief meteorologist Ginger Z has the forecast for the weekend. Hey, Ginger.
Devin, thank you. How about we talk about heat, shall we? Because it's not over. I know a lot of people are saying, it feels so good. Fall's here. Pumpkins, lattes, doing it all. Well, Raleigh, North Carolina will just start to be able to do that today because they were 100 degrees yesterday. Yes, this late in the season, that is not right, and it actually has never been this late in the season to see a 100 degree. It was their hottest October temperature. They just kept breaking records, as do a lot of friends down along the Gulf Coast, and still will today, where it'll feel like more than 100 degrees, thanks to that dome of high pressure that's starting to retreat, starting to fall apart, and that front starting to come in. Yes, the numbers will slide finally into the 80s in Atlanta. You've had how many days? 91 days above 100, or above 90, and now you're going to see the 80s again. So refreshing, I'm sure. But it's also going to bring some moisture, help to usher in some moisture to New Mexico. So you've got that flow. There's a lot of things happening, but basically it means with that flash flood watch, and even up to Albuquerque, there's some small stream advisories in place. So you could see up to 3 inches of rain with these storms.
All right, thanks, Ginger, for that. Finally, today, they call it the largest pop culture event on the East Coast. Comic-Con is this weekend in New York City. It's the showcases the latest in comics, of course, video games, toys, and the like. A lot of people dressed up in costumes as well. An estimated 250,000 people turn out for this event every year. Our producers Kate Fallon, Ellie Smith went down there to check it out, and they ran into Neil deGrasse Tyson, host of Star Talk podcast. Here's some of that.
For me, the most pressing crisis on planet Earth is the fact that we have heads of state around the world who do not heed the warnings of scientists. That is the beginning of the end of civilization. Social media, I find to be both harmful and helpful at very high levels. So right now, I don't know what's going to win in the end. If science literacy loses, then society loses, civilization loses. So access to good quality science, which we do have on the internet, I would hope wins the day. Otherwise, there'll be no one on Earth to talk about it. It's not only the value of the satellites, it's the value of the commerce enabled by the satellites. And for all we know, that could be rising through $1 trillion right now. A Space Force would protect those assets. If there's anything you want the military to do, is to protect your body, your way of life, but also the stuff that enables your way of life, and those are our assets. I wish I had a strong argument against the hypothesis that we live in a simulation, but I don't. I'm sorry. And I think we're all programmed by some snot-nosed alien kid in his parents' basement, and anytime Earth gets too peaceful and tranquil, they get bored, and then they throw in a war or a weird politician or something just to stir the pots for their own entertainment. Astrology is a hoax perpetrated upon scientifically illiterate people for their own gain. Okay. I have 6 space vests that are never worn with a space tie, because the vest is kind of loud on its own. And when I wear the ties, I'll wear a neutral vest or no vest at all, and I have about 120.
All right, quite a wardrobe there from Neil deGrasse Tyson. You never know who you'll run into at Comic-Con. Our thanks to Kate Fallon and Ellie Smith for that. Stay with us here on ABC News Live. A big day of news ahead. I hope you join me at 3:30 Eastern Time in the briefing room. We will have all the latest politics headlines of the day, of course, tracking that big impeachment story. Then join us for World News Prime at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can follow that every night here on ABC News Live. And, of course, download the ABC News app if you haven't already. Very easy to watch us live 24/7. Track all the stories as we follow that breaking news here at ABC News. Great to have you with us. Hope you have a great weekend. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. We'll see you next time.